We continue remembering activist, artist, columnist, advocate, organizer, agitator, and so much more, manifesting in the form of Colin Robinson. And to do that way better than I could, we have joining us Sunity Maharaj, Director, Lloyd Best Institute of the Caribbean, Roberta Clarke, member Coalition Against Domestic Violence, Anton Nimblett, author, as well as Angelique Nixon, Director, CAISO, Sex and Gender Justice. And we want to thank you all so much for being a part of this conversation this evening. But Sunity, I want to start with you, please, asking for your personal view of the significance of Colins' legacy.
Oh, for me, Colin is what you refer to as a manifestation of a way of achieving change in a society like ours. We always have to say in a society like ours, because I think what he had was an understanding, not only of the process of change, but of the particular culture in which he was functioning. And his change was genuinely community-based. It really was from the ground up. And it also engaged the other. I understand the challenges with that way, but what Colin showed was that enduring change is more likely to come from cultural change rather than from the top down.
Thank you so much. And Roberta, I'll give you the opportunity to give us some of your thoughts on Colin. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I just want to start off with what I understand to be his spirit, because I think the spirit animated his approach to life, to love, to solidarity. But I think I say it over and over, he was just really a lovely man, a lovely person. He was wise and he was thoughtful. I think I heard somewhere along the line that he came first in the year he did Common Entrance. Sunity, did you hear this? That he came first in that year. And there's no surprises. And then he went on to win a scholarship when he left school here. But he definitely was really high IQ, but also high emotional intelligence. And I think that those things came together, that lovely personality, that wicked humor, but gentle laugh. All those things came together in a really charming package to make it so easy to work with him. And he was not a single issue advocate. He didn't just hold on to his cause and jealously guard it. He shared his cause with everybody, and he shared other people's causes. He made common cause with so many movements in this country. And in that regard, he was somebody you could rely on to turn up, to show up. And that he always did. He was just, I think, the exemplification of solidarity in motion. And really, I don't know. We will miss him so much, but he's left a legacy and he's left an example.
Solidarity in motion. I love that term, and I think I'm going to use it. But Anton, we invite you to share your piece on Colin. Thank you.
Yeah, this is wonderful. I mean, from the introduction of Colin, where we have to list several things, several roles that he inhabited, and then picking up on what Roberta said, that there is a wisdom there, right? So Colin was my friend. Colin was my friend, and we would just hang out and do that. But I'm aware of all these different parts of his life where we would talk about the writing. And there's a wisdom there that takes it's shared with everybody, right? There's a wisdom that he shared with us all. And if we pay attention to the lessons that he gave us in terms of how to work together, not textbook, not some way that an institution had taught, but a way that centered people, that where people matter. And so, yeah, if you're my people, I'm gonna make you laugh, I'm gonna make you think, I'm gonna make you talk to these other people over there. And that's something that Colin did just everywhere and always. And it mattered in the results in his poetry, it mattered in the results in his advocacy, it mattered in his friendships.
Sometimes it's the hardest thing to kind of break out of the silo that you're in, to reach across a divide, so people may not hold the same view as you, but at the same time to be able to engage so you can have that discussion to move towards a better position. But Angelique, please weigh in on this discussion.
Yeah, just to thank you so much. Thank you so much to be in conversation with all of you about Colin, and just to echo, for me, it is about his lessons that he left us around solidarity. He was someone who practiced what he wrote about, what he did advocacy around. And so for me, his legacy is around accountability. I think he showed us how to do that. He taught me the ways, you know, if you're wrong, admit it, talk through it, let's work through it. And in the midst of, you know, some of the most disagreements and conflict, you know, he would bring us together, especially around the LGBTI advocacy and activism. We did a lot of coalition building together. And so not only cross issues, but even within movements, he was able to bring people together and get us to a place of, even when we were quarreling, he was so generous. And, you know, I think his legacy is that, his generosity, his spirit, and his, you know, his willingness to learn and teach all at the same time. And we see it in his writing, his poetry, and his activism, and all that he left us. So many lessons. And he really cherished those difficult moments. And, you know, he would always say, oh, you remember when that happened? And then, you know, then we do this. And he was always about action. And those are the things that I see as his legacy for me.
And we have about 3 minutes more on this side of the conversation, and I want to throw this out to anyone who is willing to answer. But you all have spoken about it, but Colin worked across so many cross-sections. They're buzzwords now like liminality and intersectionality, but Colin was in poetry, creative work, to political commentary, to human rights advocacy, to cultural reading of Calypso. Now, how did he manage this so skillfully in your view? And what are some of those lessons? Angelique was speaking about lessons. What are some of the lessons here for us and for others?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I look at the collection, his poetry collection, Yet the Father Had Head, and I see all of those things that we're talking about there, right? So as poetry, there's the love for language, but there's this archive of his life and his work a little bit in there. And there's the archive of his love for Trinidad and the Trinidadian culture, and his work as an advocate around LGBTQI plus issues. But the way the work weaves, the way one poem can weave the love of language into the love and the importance of what we're doing on this planet and what we're doing with this life thing. It shows up in that work. And when you you just go a little deep. Of course, the calypso is there, right? The calypso is there and the humor is there. And if you just dig a little bit, what you see at the heart of it is a love for people and nation. And I think that is the thing that ties all of those other pieces together the way he did it.
And this is reminding me of the Mystic Prowler. He had this stuff great men were made of. It's the stuff you can miss unless you look below the surface. But Sunity, do you agree with that? And I ask that because you prefaced, you gave the context of in a society like ours. Is it that an action like this or an approach like this is necessary in a society like ours to get that kind of change that's lasting and meaningful?
Yeah, and that's why Colin made such an impact in that he was swimming against the stream, against the tide. What I think we are referring to when we talk about the many areas that he crossed is that Colin was not a fractured personality. And I think if you were to look at the challenge in the Caribbean, and it comes out of our history, it is the fractured nature of not just the societies, but the individuals. And he didn't have to work across medium, right? If you're a whole person, it just is natural. You see the poem, you see the poetry, you see the talk, you see the people, you can see your society in its wholeness because you are whole. And there was about him that almost an innocence. You know, his big eyes always, for me, captured a certain kind of seeing the world without scales, because in so many cases, what you're working against in the Caribbean is the fractured personality that can be anything at any time, anywhere, anyhow. You really never know the core of the person you're dealing with. And that is actually, I think, the reason for so much conflict, because people will say one thing in one situation, say the opposite thing, and are comfortable because they're so fractured. What they're dealing with is the one thing at that moment that they're going to support. And they'll support the exact opposite in another situation because of the fractured nature. And I think that there are some people that you meet all over the Caribbean who somehow managed to escape that. And I think Colin was one of those people.
And we continue the conversation about Colin Robinson when we return. Stay with us. Sunity Maharaj, Roberta Clarke, Anton Nimblett, and Angelique Nixon. And Angelique, I want to ask you, describe being able to conceptualize and implement the Hardhead Award in a time frame that Colin was able to see the first recipients of that award.
Well, you know, the Hardhead Award was just so perfect, and you know, just shout out to Roberta for her work with CAISO on making that happen. And you know, we wanted to ensure that Colin was honored and celebrated in a way that he wanted to be while he was still with us. And you know, he wanted other folks to be highlighted and celebrated. He wanted the Hardhead Award to be something that us to really recognize and to honor and to support the work of grassroots activists across a range of human rights and social justice issues. And so that's, you know, it was so important for us as CAISO to do that in collaboration with many, and so many folks wanted to join forces, and we were able to do that in we were able to do it in such a beautiful way where Colin was able to, you know, announce the awards. And so what I think it means is that it gives us a model for, one, celebrating people while they are here, and two, thinking about legacy, not in ourselves. Colin was all about, you know, what's going to happen in the future. He really invested in young people and young activists and young organizations. He encouraged folks who wanted to start something new. Well, if we're not doing it in our organization, we'll start one and we'll partner, we'll collaborate, we'll do stuff together. And so the Hardhead Award is really about, you know, celebrating the work that people are doing in their communities all over the country. And in fact, our vision is to make it even regional. And so we want it to be something that is known, because Colin's activism spread across the world. I mean, people know Colin, and that's what's been so amazing. You know, we hear from people about their experiences with Colin in a range from all over the world, but also from a range of different issues, from the human rights mechanisms work that he did to LGBT organizing to a range of justice issues. He worked so closely with so many people. And the Hardhead Award is really about celebrating and honoring that legacy and being persistent and being able to speak against and speak truth to power, and being able to stand up and do the work that you want to do. And it's about his fearlessness, his stubbornness, and his persistence and focus, and most of all, his creativity. He really demanded us to be creative in our imagination, and to think large, and to think outside the box. And so that's what the Hardhead Award represents.
And thank you so much. And I want to continue with Roberta. Thank you, because one of the things that you said is that he didn't hold on to a cause. It's like, my cause. If I'm not the figurehead for it, it can't happen. I'm not going to be supporting it. And how easy is that when we see many examples otherwise? But what's the importance of being able to organize or help organize, being able to delegate, and then leave others to do?
Yeah, I guess I just want to maybe add on to something that Sunity said and connected to your question. So he was a whole person, and he brought in the whole of himself and the whole of the history of the country and the region that he was from. And I think he embodied this, we have a feminist saying, the personal is political. And I think he embodied that understanding that we can make ourselves, but we are shaped by forces all around us. And those forces in the Caribbean, a lot of those forces have to do with unequal gender relations, discrimination, exclusion, marginalization because of all kinds of things. And so he experienced some of those bases of discrimination. And he also identified with others experiencing other bases of discrimination. And I think that understanding of the kind of structural inequalities in the plural in this country and in the region, it was one of the things that animated his work. And he had a number of tools in his toolkit to address that. So breaking the silence, he did in his writing, both in his writing in the newspaper as well as in his poetry. And his poetry is just a mix of themes, but underlying all of that, how oppression silences and damages and causes trauma in this region. So he uses his artistic sensibilities in that way, but then he built relationships, and then he was very intentional about the kind of change he wanted to make. And so he would join other people's cause in that way, with a lot of humility, honoring their leadership of their cause and bringing his own capacities to that, but not wanting to claim the whole space or suck up all the oxygen. He wasn't like that. He was very generous in spirit. And then he invited you to come to his cause as well, because he wanted to build a stronger NGO movement. And so I think of the work that he did, for example, with ending child marriage, a few years ago, the collaborations that he engaged in, the work that we did on the nonprofit organization bill to create a stronger legislation more supportive of the NGO sector, the work that we did on the sex offenders registry, and latterly the work on the domestic violence bill. And I wanted, because I went to my emails, I wanted Colin to speak through us. And thinking about sexual harassment, and that's very current now, and we had an exchange, and Colin says, coming up with a practical but inclusive definition of sexual harassment will be an important undertaking. Most of our experience is not with unwelcome sexual advances, but with how homophobia creates hostile workplaces and how supervisors and union stewards decline to respond, and victims are held responsible for their harassment. So just to say, he had the vision of how he could bring his own experience to the work of making change and making common cause.
And in terms of having that vision and seeing that vision being taken forward and evolved and carried on, in the last 2.5 minutes that we have, we'd ask about lessons, or what do you want people to know and remember most about Colin? And I start off with you, please, Anton.
The thing that I want people to remember most is Colin the person. And going back to the theme that Sunity started, all of the things we celebrate in terms of his achievement and his contributions come from that space of Colin as the whole person. And repeatedly, if you exchange the panel here with 400 other groups of people, you're going to hear examples of people just engaging with Colin one-on-one in a way that made them feel seen, in a way that made them feel important. And that's something that is not common. So that, to me, is at the heart of the whole conversation.
Thank you so much. Sunity, what do you want people to know and remember most about Colin?
Sorry, say again?
Yes, I'm asking Sunity, what do you want people to remember most about Colin?
Well, I want them to be, to see his life as an example of how possible change is, how easy it is, how achievable it is. He took one of the hardest issues in the Caribbean society, and he was able to just reach out, engage, and carry the society forward. He has done what all of us aspire to do, leave the world a better place. And it is in the reach of everyone.
Thank you so much. I hear a lot of Roberta, you're sharing a 20 seconds each with you and Angelique. Thanks.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said, and I think that also Colin was really very brave, and I think the book is something that we will keep going back to and reading and saying, my God, look at that wisdom in that book, and how how he was so expansive in his sharing of his life and culling of the lessons from his life. And I think that's something that we can take away from him, because we all have to do that excavation of meaning. What do we come in the world with? What impact the world has on us, and what impact we want to leave the world with.
Definitely, and Angelique, and I want to squeeze in a little time with Angelique. Thank you. Just making sure that you have the last say. Angelique, we have about 20 seconds more.
Just visioning justice and doing the work. I think, I want people to know his writing. I want people to know his fearlessness. And I want people to know that, yes, he was a whole person, and that he spent so much time investing in us. And so now we get to do this work in his honor and with his beautiful creative mind, brilliant creative mind.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Looking at pieces of a whole person, helping us be more of ourselves. On behalf of the entire news team, I'm DK Ronstadt. Thank you for joining us, and have a good week.